Hey everyone, so today I am jacked to talk to my friend Noeleen McGrath. She's the founder and president of McGrath Communications. She specializes in executive media training and executive presentation skills and coaching. She was an award-winning TV news journalist for 12 years at the network and local levels. She's in Chicago, back home in the Midwest, which is very cool. Her years of interviewing executives convinced her to develop programs that emphasize messaging, on camera, and crisis communication skills. She works primarily with executives in Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. I have to share this great compliment that Noeleen got from a client. While other trainers I've worked with have left their students with a list of do's and don'ts to worry about, Noeleen left them with the two things they really need: new skills and the confidence to use them. Now, a cool fact, when she's not working, you'll find her on the beach playing twos volleyball, walking her rescue dog Molly, or trying to corral her twin boys, usually with the help of her wonderful husband. So very, very cool. I'm so glad you're here, Noeleen. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Well, it's been a long time. I think we met, at a big UGA event with Lenny Rose about, 6, 7, 8 years ago? Or did we meet at SobCon?
No, it was Lenny. And then I think, again, it was, you know what it was? Why do you think SobCon? It was because Social Media Chicago sponsored that first night event. And it was so funny because we had briefly met with Lenny and then we hadn't seen each other in forever. And we mostly chatted on Twitter. And then the next thing I know, I see you and I come up and I give you a huge hug. Phil!
Because you're shy just like me.
I know. It was like old home week. Oh, Phil. Yay.
Yeah. No, well, that is one of the things I love most about you is you are so warm and so welcoming. And I can only imagine how fun it is to be coached by you and to get some presentation training. So what is your background? Like, how did you get to be just a powerhouse on camera?
Interesting. So brief background about my family. My parents are both from Ireland. I grew up in Chicago, as you said, on the north side of the city. And I just always seemed to be involved in things in the Irish community. My parents had an Irish radio program, and we used to do that like every Saturday. So from the time I was about 9, my sister is 2 years older. She was 11. Every other Sunday we go down to LaGrange, and we're the ones sort of like half producing the show, taking the requests for people. My sister would find the album and cue it up on the turntable. I'm dating myself now. We're going way back to the 70s. But it was just a really great experience. And I think my dad would promote various Irish concerts. And so I was always kind of out doing things. And I really never thought anything of it. When you're a kid, you just think, oh, everybody does this. Like, isn't this what we all do? And then it's an interesting story. I thought I would wind up in print. I really liked writing. And I was the editor of my high school newspaper. And when I got into college, I sort of called around and I think I got the Tribune. And long story shorter, I got a really curmudgeonly guy who just didn't want to be very helpful about internships. And so I just said, okay, clearly I'm moving on here. And I had a speech teacher. I went to DePaul in Chicago. And he said, did you ever think about TV news? I mean, I know you really like print, but did you ever think about it? He said, you blow me away in person with your speeches and whatever. And I said, okay, I'll check it out. So I literally, with no help, start cold calling. And the ABC station, which is the longtime Powerhouse in Chicago at the time, said, yeah, send us your resume, send us whatever, and come in. And I was lucky enough to get an internship. And then from there, I interned with CNN's Chicago Bureau when I was a junior in college. And within a month, I was producing stories for them. And then when I finished my internship, they asked me to stay on and work with them, which was great. And so it was sort of like this progression little by little. I was always sort of doing stuff media-wise. I really liked writing. And then I wound up producing at CNN when I'm in college, and people are all saying, are you serious? What are you doing? And I said, I just was a natural. I just found my niche, and I just sort of went with it. And it's interesting because first time I went on camera, I was an intern at Channel 7, the ABC in Chicago. And the photog, the videographer, we call them photogs in the business, he said everybody stopped. We were at City Hall, and it was some mayoral something or other event. And he said, everybody stopped and watched you. And I just didn't even think anything of it. I was just talking and doing my thing. And I think the greatest gift I had was I never really focused on other people. I just had this ability to just kind of talk and be me. And I have good presence. And it just all sort of came really naturally and easily to me. And I think part of it too is I just was always out talking. Like in church, I would do readings every week and whatever. And it's kind of odd because typically when I first meet you, I might be a little shyer. That's my nature as a kid. And then I got more outgoing as I got older. But, I just feel like everybody has something in them. I always say to people when I coach them, everything I teach you, I have learned it myself and probably the hard way, sadly. But everybody has something. So you may not, on the face of it, appear to be the most charismatic person, but everybody has something that you can use. And I promise you, there's some charisma in you. Whether I pull it out or whether I introduce you to it, or whether you just say, this isn't for me, or I do something else, there's always something that you can emphasize. There's always a positive, I believe, to emphasize. Sometimes people get hung up on the negatives or trying to be like somebody else. Stay in your lane, be you, be the best you can be. Someone asked me about this, it's so funny, the other day. Do you always just show Steve Jobs and tell people what a great presenter he is? And I said, you know what? He was great. And please don't get me wrong. But he's not who you should be modeling yourself after. He was great at that because that was him. For you, it might be something else. I say to people, I'm a good storyteller. I'm not a good joke teller. So I'm not going to tell a joke. But I can tell you a story, and I'll get you there, and I'll pull you in, and there'll be great meaning in a presentation or a speech that I give. So, everybody's got something. It's just a question of sometimes figuring it out and being able to tap into it when you want to.
So how do we get started figuring that out? I mean, I agree with you, right, that we all have some special gift, something interesting. How do we figure that out?
Sometimes you need coaching. I mean, that's just the bottom line. For some people, it's tough, and they really do need to go to a coach who can help them see what's going to work for them. For other people, maybe you just start asking people. Ask your colleague, hey, what did you like about this? Was there something that my presentation that you thought was really good? So some people are great at putting a slide deck together, and they can tell a story through a deck, and they've got it all worked out, and it moves, and you come away thinking, this was really informative. I really understand the issue a lot better now, and I'd love to talk to this person further. I mean, everybody's got something. So sometimes you can ask. Sometimes you might need a professional to help you figure it out. Just depends.
That's good. So so listening, paying attention, asking the question, that's good. Or finding a coach, absolutely, who can pay attention to that. So you talked about joke telling, you talked about, storytelling. So now how does that translate though to somebody who never gets in front of an audience? I mean, do we really need to focus on a personal brand if we're never speaking in front of people?
It's an interesting question, and I would say this. One, my first thought for people is whether you intend to be at your company forever, whether you work for somebody else, whether you work for yourself, we're all our own brand. Especially the world has gotten so much smaller now, and social media and the emphasis on communication has only grown by leaps and bounds over the last several years, 7 or 8 years, I'm thinking, really. And so you really can't afford to not pay attention to these sorts of things, right? So to me, one of the things that I often work with on people, and they don't think about it as this is the first thing I need to think about. It's easy to say, look, if I'm doing an interview, I need to work on this. If I'm doing a keynote address, I need to work on this. We often take the day-to-day business communication for granted. And I'll say to people, so when you're going in to report to your boss and update them on a project, have you thought about what you're going to say? Do you have your key points? Have you run this down? These are things that are important. Communication becomes important. There was a client that I worked with. This company sort of figures out pretty early on in the careers of their employees who's going to be on the rising star list. And I get brought in to work with the rising stars. So one person told me the story of they left their voicemail, their boss a voicemail to update them on a project. And it was long, and it was winding, and it was rambling, and apparently it was close to 2 minutes long. The boss, who wound up being a great mentor to this person, forwarded the voicemail to them and said, take a listen to this. And when they heard it back, they realized I was all over the place. I didn't make my points clearly. He said, shorter, more concise, get to the point, let me know what it is that I need to know and move on. And that struck me as being such a great example for people. If you wouldn't leave this really long voicemail, then why would you keep talking and talking and talking and talking? I wrote a blog post once about a meeting I was at, and everybody had flown in and had a very limited amount of time to work on this project. It was sort of, okay, we're going to kick it off. Everybody goes their separate ways. We'll meet up later in a couple of weeks, but I just need to get through this whole agenda, the person who brought us all together. So one person kept interjecting, and finally the woman running the meeting said, can you do it in 2 minutes? If you can't, we need to take it offline and talk about it afterwards. And this person continued to go on and on, and people are looking at their clocks and the watches, and everybody had a flight to catch. And so they're great reminders that people are judging you all the time. And it's not because you're up giving a presentation. It's not necessarily because you're on camera. It's because you work with them. It's because you're your own brand. And you want to put your best foot forward, whether it's what you deem to be a really simple update meeting, or it could be a presentation before the board, which is obviously much higher level, but people are watching, they're taking note. So everything that you do becomes much more important.
So people pay attention, of course, and their goal is to be crystal clear, concise, and get to the frickin' point, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So what are some of the obstacles that prevent people from being successful at that, Noeleen? I mean, I know you coach these folks, but I'm sure you've seen some folks that just frankly, they don't get it. So what are some of those obstacles, or maybe some of those warning signs that we can take and say, well, if I see this in myself, I should maybe pause and start again?
There's a few different things I would tell you. The first one probably makes the most sense when you're talking about something that's fairly formal. I see this a lot, particularly with people who are really, really bright but don't have a lot of time. They think they can wing it. And they say, you know what? I'm not really going to do a lot of homework. I am just going to say, I know what I want to talk about. I'm going to make this point. I'm going to make this point. And then that's sort of it. Anyone who says to me, or I hear someone say, oh, I can ad-lib that, I can wing that, I stop and say, whoa, wait a minute. Because one of the things when I work with people, I said, it's not enough to know what your messages are or what you want to say. It's great that you sat down and you focused and you know what you want to accomplish. But if you don't practice it, it's probably not going to work out for you. Maybe I can think of one person off the top of my head who really is a great ad-libber. Everybody else practices to make it look effortless, to make you think maybe they're ad-libbing. But truly, they've done a lot of practice. They've practiced their answers. They've practiced what they want to say. So anyone who says to me, I'm going to wing it, that always sort of, the bell's going off for me. I think the second thing that I see a lot is people who really don't understand that you have such a small amount of time to make an impression on people. And if I see somebody who is struggling hard to get to the point, but I see in a meeting, eyes are looking up, they're trying to remember something, or they're looking down, or they're fidgeting and they're kind of nervous, that always turns people off, and they think that you don't know what you're talking about. There are these little nervous habits that we all kind of have when we're not really engaged, or we haven't thought about it and we can't figure it out and we don't know. So sometimes the best thing you can do is just say, I don't have the answer, but I'll get back to you on that. you can try to find your way, but sometimes if you just wind up BSing all the time, then people are going to call you on that, and they're not going to take you very seriously, and they're going to think either you don't know your stuff or you haven't prepared.
So don't wing it. Get that you only get a small amount of point, and don't BS, right? Get back to people. Those are really, really useful points for anyone who's doing any sort of communication. People do know when you're full of crap. You're not as smart as you think you are. So instead of that, take a pause, get back to people. That's really, really great advice. So when we are on camera, I mean, you are an expert and just a maestro of being on camera. If we're going to be on camera and we have, 3 minutes to make a point, how would we prep for that? How would we prepare to get our message across to the world in just 3 minutes or less?
First thing is preparation. Preparation leads to confidence, which allows you to execute. What do you want to say? Force yourself to write it down in as few sentences as you possibly can. What is your goal? What are you trying to say here? 2, I don't think anybody hears more than 3 messages. You will not have anyone's attention. They are not going to be able to take in any more than 3 things. What are the 3 most important things that you want to say? And then figure out how much time you have for those 3 things. So for instance, when I was doing the videos for my website, I'm a writer first and foremost, so I have to write everything out. How we write isn't how we speak, so then I have to figure out how I'm going to say it. So then I practice it a few different ways, and I figure most of what I say is probably going to be the most important stuff, and then I review my notes, and then I think, did I miss anything? Is there anything really important? Is there anything that I could lose? And then I do a final run through, and I time myself, and I see where I am. If I am over, I know I need to cut out something, cut out an example, cut out a story, something along those lines. If I'm under, then it depends on how much. If I'm under by 30 seconds, I'm probably going to leave it, especially if it's live and in front of people. Someone may ask me something may get interrupted. I'm going to leave a little bit of pad for myself. But if I'm doing something, my advice to people, if they're just doing a video, let's say for themselves, for their business, I would do a minute. I would get in and out in a minute, really, really quick. If you are really, really charismatic and you want to go 2, you can, but I might suggest that you have video or something that's going to go over you so that you're not up the entire time. Because it's hard to expect people to pay attention to someone on camera for 3 minutes. It's a long time.
3 minutes is a long time. Wow. So I got to tell you, most people, they think they can't get any point across in less than 5 minutes. In fact, I'm part of a group of speakers. I have folks in that group who say if they don't get at least 90 minutes on a keynote, they don't even want the gig. So what do you say to that?
I'll tell you exactly what I say. The hardest thing to do is to speak for 5 minutes. You want to know why? You have to focus. You have to know exactly what you want to say, and it requires a ton of work and a ton of preparation. You have to be so disciplined. You can't go off in some tangent. You can't allow yourself to think about, oh, you know what, that reminds me of this story, and go down that rabbit hole. You can't do it. It is the hardest thing. When people say to me, you know what, I want media training, but I only want to do it for a limited amount of time, I say, we can do it, but it's going to require a lot of focus. It's going to require people to be really on point, to have done the homework, to be familiar with the messaging. And it's hard. It's hard to get in everything you want in a short amount of time. The keynote speakers for 90 minutes, I mean, I'd call BS on that, really, I would. You should easily be able to do something in 20 or 30 minutes. But again, it requires a lot of extra work. It does. It's very easy for someone to get up there and talk for 90 minutes. People who are talkers, of course. These are people who make their living off of talking, right? It's much more difficult to come in with a very sharp, focused 20 minutes and allow some time for Q&A at the end of that. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to think it through. You have to know what you want to say. And then you have to edit. It's hard. My advice when people are trying to come and figure out what do I cut out, what do I do, record yourself. Everybody's got a phone, record yourself. Even if you don't want to look at yourself, some people say, I can't do the video part. Okay, well, that's fine. Let's just do the audio to start. Just listen to yourself. And a lot of times you'll hear, oh, I repeated myself there. Oh, I've already made that point. Oh, I made that point earlier. You know what? That's pretty similar to this point. I'm going to get rid of that. You can usually hear, and sometimes it's easier for people to just do the audio first and then lock in what your content is, and then deliver it. The reason I always like to leave pad, I'm a very interactive kind of presenter. I like to ask questions. I like people to be engaged. If I'm training and developing a program for a company, I always know the background of my people. I tell you ahead of time, you've got to be involved. I'm going to call on you. I'm going to have you come up here. I'm going to record you. We are going to be very engaged in this process. Now, I'll grant you, a keynote doesn't necessarily offer great interactivity in a lot of instances. But, to me, I'm always thinking, how is the audience going to receive this? How will they perceive this? How will they take something away from this? If all I'm doing is getting up there, standing behind a podium and talking for 90 minutes ad nauseum, it's probably not going to be very impactful. I like people who walk and talk. I like people who have a lot of energy. You don't have to shout at me, but you have to be really smart and figuring out, what are you going to do? How am I going to say that? How am I going to get my point across to people? And it can be done in 20 minutes. It takes a lot more work, though.
So focus and preparation is really important. Having your points, practice. So you must be like a really focused person, right? You don't suffer from ADD at all, right, Noeleen?
I do. I think almost we had this discussion once. My background is TV news, as you know. And I said somehow a lot of the TV news people all wound up with ADD and found each other in some way, shape, or form. I think what ADD also does, though, is I have this hyper focus where I can write on deadline like nobody's business. I mean, after 12 years in TV news, if they needed 3 different stories in a couple of hours, they'd say, Noeleen, can you do it? And I say, sure, I can. And, I just type away, but I am just that focused. It's interesting. I feel like you would see the ADD more on the personal side than the professional side. Professional, I feel like it's very much a laser focus, and I know exactly what I want to do, and it's very targeted. It's part of when people are always fascinated because I'm a perfectionist and I'm very organized, but I'm also very messy, which is sort of a disconnect for a lot of people. And I will say, don't touch that pile, though, because I know exactly the third file folder from the bottom is blue, and it's the one that I want.
Yeah, well, it is a dichotomy, but I think, sometimes what makes us strong also makes us weak, and what makes us weak makes us strong. So that hyper focus sometimes means hyper, holy crap, unfocused, but often gets us locked in. And I suffer from a lot of the same. We were talking about that off camera, about how, sometimes it's okay to be all over, because as long as somebody else is an OCD, that actually ends up working to our benefit. But it doesn't happen linearly, which is very difficult for some to understand.
You know what? Here's what I think. I think you tap into whatever works for you. I'm a really creative person, and I know that I can sit down and write for 3 hours, and I'll look up and say, wow, look at the clock, look at the time. I can't believe I just had 3 hours of writing and I didn't really notice it at all. But by the same token, I think whatever your way of working, whether you're really creative like me and you've got to write everything out first and then you kind of move on from there. There are people who are talkers. And if you're someone who's a talker, then you talk it out. Talk your way through it, figure it out. I think particularly maybe in TV news with the folks that I saw that were ADD, there's a creativity that comes with it. And from that creativity comes greatness, particularly when you're talking about being on camera or having great things to say. I mean, what I love about you and your presentations, aside from your energy and you've got a great voice and presence, I love that you have figured out that I'm going to wear a Pac-Man jacket. That's what's going to work for me. That's what's going to, and so, but I don't know that someone who, maybe isn't ADD thinks that's outside of the box and thinks that I'm going to wear a Pac-Man jacket and revels in that. So, look, it's you and I have talked about this where I say, figure out what works for you. for me to say to you, hey, look at Steve Jobs, there's a great presenter. To me, that makes absolutely zero sense. He's fantastic, or I should say was fantastic, amazing. But he was himself. He was one of a kind. And you are yourself and one of a kind. And my advice to the people that I work with is, I want you to be the best that you can be. And I want you to stay in your lane, as it were, in terms of, if you have great charisma, we'll run with that. I may have to rein you in a little bit, but that's going to work for you. If you're someone who is low, or, has a, low key approach, but you have this quiet confidence about you, that can absolutely work for you as well. Whatever you have, work it to your advantage. And I think whether you come at that from a creative place or from, my husband we are complete opposites. He's more a mathematical kind of place, but he's still a good writer and he'll still get there. It's just that his approach is going to be different from mine. And, but at the end of the day, it's all great and the information is all going to get out there and people are going to learn something.
Yeah. So respecting other people's differences and embracing our own strengths is the key to a great presentation and the key to a great style, and really amplifying those and turning those up instead of worrying about being Steve Jobs or Phil Gerbishak or Noeleen McGrath, right?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something that, again, you know this. Everything I teach people, I've learned the hard way, as I've said. And I really was stuck on being perfect for a long time. When I was on camera, every week, I would sit down and I would play every single thing back, every single story, every single live shot, everything that I did. And I would sit there and, no one's has a more critical eye than I do to say, you're phoning it in, you did this, you have no energy, And again, there could have been perfectly great reasons for it. It was the end of a 12-hour day. It's pitch dark behind me. And guess what? The fire was 12 hours ago, but I'm still out here in the dark and I got to sell it, but I didn't feel like selling it. And so, my point is that you've got to really figure out, do you want to be perfect or do you want to be memorable? And for me, I figured out that it was far better to be memorable than perfect. That means that ums are actually okay. If you are charismatic and you have the crowd in the palm of your hand, I'm not going to worry about an or a like here and there. Now, can it be every other sentence? No. But be memorable, be yourself, be authentic, and people will respond to you. When you're trying so hard to have everything be perfect so that I could get a resume taped together, so that I could move on to the next market and do whatever else, you lose something. You lose the spontaneity, you lose the appeal. People don't want to watch you as much. They don't want to listen to you as much. So be yourself, be authentic, be real. And don't worry about the perfectionism so much. Memorable.
I love that. Do you want to be perfect or do you want to be memorable? You have a choice, folks. And if I were you, I would pick memorable. Because memorable is lasting. Memorable lets you leave a legacy. And memorable is someone that is worth knowing time and time again, that people go back to. So I think that's spectacular advice, Noeleen. Thank you very much for that. So if we were to give them one more actionable tip, you've given us a ton here. One more actionable tip to get our communication turned up even a little bit more. How we can get started, how we can, continue this on. What would that one piece of information be, that one bit of advice, so they can walk out confident and say, heck yeah, I'm going to be the best communicator I can be?
You know what? I'll give you a little checklist. So first thing, you sit down and think about, what do I want to communicate? 2, what are my 3 main messages? And how am I going to deliver them? How succinctly can I get them out there? Practice a little bit. And then the other comes down to performance. I railed against this for years. I did not want to believe that when I was on camera that it was a performance. But the reality is that it is. A lot of times, the superficial things like your hair, your makeup, or whatever when you're a woman, they matter. If people are distracted by the way you look in a negative way, then that means they're not listening to you, the messenger. they're not hearing your message, right? So you have to then think about, what is the performance? Am I phoning this in? Am I really giving it my all? And when you practice, after you get through that audio part and you're editing everything, you have to watch yourself and you have to say, would I want to watch me? Am I projecting good energy? Is it positive? Do I have good charisma? What's my body language like? Am I closed off? Am I open? Am I using gestures? What's the eye contact like? Am I making eye contact with people? Which is always really important. And then I think there's just sort of, some undefinable part of, I really like this person. I am connecting with this person. And it's hard to be objective about that sometimes. So I would go back to then ask people, ask your spouse, ask the person you live with, ask a coworker or a friend that you trust, hey, what do you think of this? And most of the time, people are pretty on the money. They have a good idea. I work with a lot of companies when I work in groups. And after I give my critique, if someone, wants to chime in and we have time, I said, feel free to chime in. Hey, you know what else I really like that you did? I did that, and you did this, and you did that well. I'm someone who likes to walk and talk. That's not for everybody. You could try it out. And that's something people can quickly tell you, oh, no, you shouldn't walk. You should stay put. But, it's a whole performance. You have to do the homework, but then you have to practice, and then you have to sort of connect with, what is it about me that is making people want to watch?
So doing your homework, plan it out, practice, perform, and then be objective in your own feedback and getting it from others so you can find out what other people want to watch and do more of that, and what disconnects them and do less of that.
Correct.
That's a great checklist for us, Noeleen. So cool. So if people want to find you, the website is mcgrathcomm.com. That's McGrathcomm.com. This is my friend, Noeleen McGrath. This has been great. You are awesome. You give us some great stuff to think about when it comes to presenting, showing up better, whether we're doing boardroom, whether we're doing keynotes, or whether we're just doing a quick little Facebook Live, all stuff we can use. Thanks so much for being here, Noeleen. You are a rock star.
Thanks, Phil. I've had a great time.
Me too.